Would you see general... I'll keep using the word tilt even though it doesn't fully apply, but would you see that as one of your biggest flaws as a player, or...?
Certainly. Yeah, my mental game is definitely my biggest weakness, especially at this point.
What else, what other areas of your game do you think you should improve, or do you think are lacking?
I'm never a very creative player. I don't think particularly well on my feet, although I've been getting better at that, I feel. But yeah, creativity is the biggest thing. I'm not someone who looks at a scenario and comes up with a lot of unique responses right off the bat. If I come up with something special, it's through a lot of practice, and I just try and vary a bunch of little things within my game, and eventually something comes together as a whole after a lot of hours of hard work. I don't just come up with interesting ideas. Although I'm not sure, very few players are actually like that. A lot of the time when you see something creative, it is the process, or the end result of that process of hard work.
Is there any way you can remedy that?
I don't really think you can force yourself to become very creative. The way I approach it is just to work harder or think about the game more and just put that effort in necessary to be comfortable with a bunch of different situations and to know how to react.
You've been known to be very vocal and very critical about game balance. At the same time, if you take a holistic approach, stats are against you because the matches tend to pan out close to 50-50. But you certainly have a different approach to that. Could you explain it a little bit?
Well, there's another thing to say. Ladder statistics are obviously skewed because the ladder system's set up to try and have you winning 50-50. Statistics, just you can't look at them. Like every single patch, people have said, okay, Zerg is going to be overpowered now. And then Terran and Protoss find new timings, or they discover that they actually can play a late-game macro. It's just people need to be given time to adapt to the patches, and obviously the time before they do adapt, that skews it because they're getting wins that are representative of their skill and experience, not of game balance. So I think you should look at the game, look at the gameplay, take into account the relative skills of the players, and any random one-off chances that happen within the game. Look at that if you actually want to discuss game balance. Looking at statistics and stuff, that's, honestly, I just use that to convince the community because they don't understand, you know, if you actually do try and go in and take an analytical approach, they say, no, you're full of shit. Look at the stats. So, yeah.
You talk about the relative skill of the players. What do you mean by that?
Just how well they micro, how well they macro, their decision-making, just how good they actually are at the game.
But that's very arbitrary, isn't it?
I don't think so. I think you can look at someone and you can tell if they made their workers at the right time, if they're keeping their money low, if they're getting supply capped. Like, everyone can look at someone like Goody and say, objectively, he has bad macro. He queues up a bunch of units, he gets supply blocked, he doesn't make enough workers, et cetera, et cetera. And you can look at someone and say they have really good micro relative to their opponent. So obviously they're going to do better in a battle than you would if you had two evenly matched opponents. So, no, everything can be broken down pretty objectively, I think.
You say it out loud at major events with a major audience. Hey, Zerg is not supposed to beat Protoss, but... and you usually tend to put down a Protoss defeat against a Zerg player that the Protoss player messed up. So would you say that if you had a clone and he played Protoss, he would beat you how many times out of 10?
7 or 8.
7.
Would win 7 or 8.
So if we assume that what you say about balance is 100% correct, does this mean that players like Nesty, who win GSLs and stuff, are so far ahead of the curve that they are so awesome and amazing? Or how would you explain that? I mean, some Zergs do win.
Well, certainly, but there are other factors involved. He played Inca in the finals. Inca was obviously not on his level. That wasn't a comment on balance. That was a comment on Inca being pretty bad PvZ and Nesty having builds that were prepared for him. And if you look at the season before, Nesty got knocked out first round by someone who was considered a joke by most people, Sen Zenith, and also Boxer Cheesing, I believe. So he just lost first round, then he wins the next season. There's a lot of intangibles. StarCraft 2 is a young game, and it's a very volatile game. Cheese is very effective. Scouting isn't particularly good. And like I said, it's a young game. People don't have it figured out. You can't tell, you know, just the tiniest scouting information StarCraft 1 could give away a strategy entirely. Everyone knew the game really, really well. StarCraft 2 isn't at that level of maturity yet, so there's a lot more variance early game. It's a lot easier for a lesser player to defeat a better player or to get lucky. But like I said, bracket strength, I mean, obviously, look at my bracket here at this event. I got Naniwa, Thorzane, and MC with myself, I'd say that's the top 4 players in the tournament. They're all in the bottom bracket, and Huck is away from me within my half. That's a really easy bracket. I could get through that and, end up in the finals, despite the fact that I couldn't beat MC or something, or a good Protoss, just because I'm going to avoid them until that point. And if you look at it, we got 3 Zergs through. All 3 of us had easy groups, and I'd say that at least 2 of the 3 of us are worse than Rhett and Demaga. They got knocked out because they had hard groups. There's just so much involved that you can't take statistics and tournament wins and all that to prove anything in a rational discussion.
So why not switch a race? If you constantly, complain about Zerg being underpowered, and sometimes it's my impression you go on tilt even before the game starts. If for instance, the MLG event against MC, the second series, I honestly thought you approached it with and this is just a noob talking, with the wrong mindset. Why wouldn't you switch the race if you want to win?
Well, as for MC, that wasn't the case. I cheesed him in 2 situations where cheese was the best strategy, in my justifiable opinion. Then I got cannon rushed, which is blockable with a small mistake, but I 15 hashed. I was going for a macro game there. Then on Test Bug, which is a good map for CVV, good map for macro, I went for a macro game as well. That wasn't tilt. But yeah, I've said before, if knowing what I know now, back in January when I was considering it, I would have switched to Protoss or Terran. But Zerg was already bidding improved every patch, and it's still the case for the most part. And it's just, Zerg is the race I've invested a year of practice time into. It's the race I feel comfortable with. I like it. I think it has a lot of potential in it. It's just not good enough. And to switch to Protoss while they were constantly improving Zerg, which is the race I want to play, that just feels kind of stupid, because eventually they should end up with a balanced game. I can't imagine them not fixing it until it is. They're just going about it really, really slowly, and I thought it would happen faster.